friends, and happy birthday to Maud Hart Lovelace, the author of the Betsy Tacy series, which we will be discussing again today. Today, Maud Hart Lovelace would be 127 years old by my calculations. She was born on April 25th, 1892. So I think if my math was correct, that would be 127. So cheers to Maud Hart Lovelace and everybody who loves her books. Today we will be discussing Betsy in spite of herself. And in this book, Betsy is a sophomore in high school. Hold on, I need to take a little drinky of wine. Today was a long day. So nice. Okay, so I am not going to lie, I was a little bit nervous about these high school years books after Heaven to Betsy that we read in March. Now, the reason for that was not because Betsy was boy crazy or anything like that. I understand that that is just a teenager thing. But in Heaven to Betsy, I just didn't like Betsy's attitude. However, I was pleasantly surprised with Betsy in spite of herself. And this is not because Betsy's attitude has really changed that much. She's still a teenager. She's still messing up. She's still being boy crazy, all that stuff. But I felt like I could sympathize a little bit more with her in this book for some reason. And I think it was because that in this one you really got a sense that Betsy isn't confident in herself. She is a typical teenage girl who, from the outside and everybody seeing her and looking in on her life thinks that this girl's got everything. She has, so many friends, all these boys hanging all over her all the time. And she's popular and people think she's pretty. She's smart. She's a great writer. But Betsy doesn't really see any of that. She compares herself to all of her other girlfriends. Being a single girl myself, I have been a single girl for probably the majority of my life, and I understand that. People can tell you all the time things that you probably know in your head are true. That is not your day-to-day experience in your head. And I totally get that with Betsy. I feel like this was Betsy's problem. The theme of this book is that Betsy wants to change herself so that she can just be like all of her other friends and find a guy and be part of this club, basically. One of the things that I really like about this whole series, and especially the last two books, is that Betsy really is a flawed character. She's a flawed protagonist, but that makes it very real. And I think that Maud Hart Lovelace did a great job at really showing a real person. He is definitely not this, perfect individual. She makes a lot of mistakes, and I admire that about Betsy and about Maud Hart Lovelace for creating a character that way. And actually, a lot of the characters in this series are that way. You don't get these perfect teenage kids that don't really exist. Julia, Betsy's older sister, is another one. She's very confident in herself, but I found Julia irritating in this book. We got a lot more of Julia than we have in the past, and we were really seeing just how she treats dating and how she treats these guys that she's with. And I found that not good. Like, she had a couple of really nice guys, and it never really goes into why she decided she didn't like them. She just got bored of them, but instead of telling them, she led them along. And I didn't appreciate that too much. So, so yeah, there's definitely a lot of flawed characters in the Betsy Tacy series, but I like that. I'm finding that that is very good to see. So the main focus of this is, like I said, Betsy wanting to change herself in order to win a guy's affection, and she succeeds in doing this in some ways. She does meet a guy who likes her as more than a friend, and they do date, but through that relationship, and this is a spoiler alert, sort of, um, through this relationship, Betsy kind of uh, becomes more confident in her own self and not the character that she has created for herself. I did not enjoy the relationship part of the book because that was very concerning for me to watch Betsy and this boy and how this boy treated her and how Betsy let herself be treated. But at the same time, I think for a teenager to see that is probably a very good learning experience. So that was my main takeaway from this book. Don't change yourself for a guy, girls. Every once in a while, you have to tell them when you want to do something for you, not always do what they want to do. Because sometimes you'll want to drive around in their stinking car all the dang time. And that's okay. They can go to a dance with you and they can put on a smile and like it. There. Sorry, little rant there from the single girl. So, anyway, rant aside, some of my favorite scenes in this book. One of them was especially the scenes where she went to visit Tib in Milwaukee. And I don't know if you've watched my Heaven to Betsy review, you know that I was very disappointed at the lack of um, mention that Tib got in that book. Just felt like there was a very big lack of Tib and any mention of Tib in that book. So in this book, we get like 3 or 4 chapters of Betsy with Tib. Betsy goes to visit Tib in Milwaukee for Christmas, and she, at that point, Milwaukee is very much a German city, and she gets to experience that culture and sees Tib in a new light. She sees that Tib knows German, and she gets to experience these new traditions, and even talks about her idea to change herself with Tib, and they, have a good talk about that. And yeah, that was a very, those were just very nice chapters to read. It was, you just got to see all of Tib's family. You got to find out some secrets and some premonitions for the future. And yeah, it was just very, very endearing and heartwarming to see Tib again. I think she might be one of my favorite characters. And then also the other scene that I really enjoyed was the leap year dance. I'll just try to show you some of the really pretty illustrations that are in some of these chapters. And yeah, in that scene, Betsy kind of asserts herself a little bit and makes her new boyfriend take her to the leap year dance, which is kind of like a Sadie Hawkins Day dance in that time, where the girls ask the boys to the dance. And I just really liked this scene because without, like, if I don't think about it, I kind of look at these books as almost being from the 1950s. And because I just don't think of people from that far back in the early 1900s going to a regular high school or doing some of the things that they do. So to me, whenever I hear they're going to a dance, I'm picturing like a sock hop from the 1950s. But then they talk about uh, these dance cards and how boys have to put in their names for certain dances. And of course, the boy that she brings is supposed to dance more dances with her, but she doesn't have to dance every dance with him. She is expected to dance with most of the boys there. And and then there's like group dances, which remind me of like Jane Austen kind of things. And that was just really interesting. It kind of brought me back to the fact that it's actually that Edwardian time period and not the 1950s sock hop era. But anyway, I really thought that that scene was really cute, and it just showed just how wholesome it was back then. So I tried to annotate this book a little bit. I'm not a big annotator. I don't write in my books, but I wrote very lightly in pencil, and then I flagged some interesting quotes that I liked from this book. So I'm going to read them to you now. So one of them that I flagged was Mrs. Ray talking about their new house, and she says, "This house is a year old, and I love it as much as I ever did. I'm going to have fun cleaning it," Mrs. Ray replied. And I wrote, WTF. We're not going to be able to see it because I wrote it really light. But I wrote, WTF. That's what she's going to say, that I'm going to have fun cleaning this house. Oh, gosh. Well, Mrs. Ray, you need to get out more. I just thought that was hilarious. Oh, and another one that I found was in the chapter that was about the Moorish Cafe, where Mr. Ray surprises Mrs. Ray by taking her to this new fancy restaurant that the Poppies have opened up for her birthday. I usually really like Mr. Ray, and this was really sweet of him to do, but he's trying to compliment his wife, but he's talking to the three girls, and he says, "Not one of you girls," he said, "is as good looking as your mother." Really? I mean, I know that he means that as like your mother is the most beautiful woman in the world. But really, Mr. Ray, could you not have put down your daughters while you're saying that? Maybe that's why Betsy has an inferiority complex. One of the chapters in this book is entitled April Weather. And that's another really pretty little painting there. And as we are in April, I really found this opening passage really fitting, especially for my neck of the woods, and I think probably where Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, from her neck of the woods as well. And yeah, I just thought this was really fitting. It says, "Lots of things can happen in a month, especially if the month is April. Never, it seemed to Betsy, had April been so full of moods." And then a little later it says, "But it rained and it snowed. The sun emerged and the snow melted, but it promptly rained and snowed again, sometimes with hail for good measure. Each time, however, there was a little progress. The bushes greened over, the buds on the maples burst open, and Margaret came down from the hills with small tight bouquets of bloodroots and Dutchman's breeches and pinkish lavender hepaticas." I don't think I said that last one right. Where I live in Pennsylvania, it is like that. In fact, right now it is in the low 60s and it is raining and cloudy, and it'll probably be like that all week. But 2 days ago, it was near 80 and sunny, and I was in shorts. So I really sympathize with the people of Deep Valley in that moment. Another thing I really liked in this book is that we start to get more of a look at Joe Willard, who in the last book we met as a boy who worked at a kind of convenience store that Betsy went to once, and he was her opponent in the essay writing contest. And he's always been very aloof, and he continues to be in this book. But we are starting to get a little bit more of a glimpse into why he is the way he is. But I liked this quote from the beginning of the book because it kind of shows the contrast between um, how Betsy is feeling at this moment and how Joe appears, um, and maybe why he isn't really giving her the time of day at this point. And it says, more than anyone she knew, Joe Willard was always fearlessly himself. And I think that right there was the kind of the theme for this whole book of just being fearlessly yourself and not worrying about what anyone else thought of you. So that was a little bit rambly, but I hope that you enjoyed my little talk about Betsy in spite of herself. I hope you have been having a good week, and if you haven't, have some wine with me. And yeah, I hope you are all having a fantastic day wherever you are, and that if you are joining us, that you enjoyed Betsy in spite of herself. And I will talk to you soon. Happy birthday, Maud, and cheers to my fellow readers. Bye, friends.